Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today, as always, I'm bringing on people from all different walks of life, all different life experiences. And I'm just grateful to have them because ultimately we're all on a mission to build a legacy and help people become their best selves. This individual actually reached out to me and asked to be on my podcast. Well, I don't know, actually. I think we got on Facebook, actually. We were
talking.
Yeah. Messaging on Facebook, and she shared a little bit more about her story and her history. And I asked her, hey, I'd love to share your story on our podcast, not because of the past, okay, although the past I think is going to give you a lot of insight into maybe where you're at, but more importantly, what she's done with her past, the overcome the journey of going from where she came from to what she's doing now and the impact she's having and the legacy she's leaving. That's the story that I want to share mostly. So, her name is Briell Blanchart, and she is a peer, so PEER, support specialist in mental health. Her goal is to work with child intergenerational trauma. She's a cult survivor, one of the wives of Warren Jeffs. And if I remember right, it's the 65th. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Wife of Warren Jeffs. She's now in prison for life. And for 20 years. And so she's had to acquire some things and to unlearn certain things, but also keep certain aspects that she had developed or was born with for how to become more. It's just crazy. She's now, she works on an advisory board. She has something called the Dream House in Salt Lake, where she helps people transition and become who they can become, help them reach their full potential. She's writing her story. She's having a book written. But I think you said some TV series as well.
Yeah, documentary and more. Yeah.
It's just so cool. And please reach out to her and give her your love and respect. Her links will be in the show notes here. But give her her love and respect, being willing to share these stories. Sometimes not all stories are easy to share. They're not always the most fun to rehearse and say, okay, this happened. But I believe, and what I found in sharing my own stories, is that there's power and there's a lot of change and a lot of good can happen when I got comfortable enough and was willing to get vulnerable and share my stories. But please give her the love and respect and share the things that you got out of her story, because she's doing it to help you. She's doing it to help people become their best selves and receive as much freedom and liberty in all areas of their life as possible. So thank you so much, Briell, for being willing to be on this show. And yeah, go ahead and tell us your story as early as you want to start, and share how you got free of the situation and what kind of instigated you moving into your now legacy and dream.
Okay, so I was born into the FLDS religion. It's a long story, but I'm writing a book so that people can get foundation at least, and then my life after that is more like activism. So as a child, I had a pretty loving lifestyle. Like, my family was more about persuasion through love, which was one of our doctrines. I did have some traumatic events as a child. I didn't recognize them as traumatic, though, because everything was watered down and smoothed over until I got older. Then it came out, like, when I turned 18 years old, I was given in an arranged marriage to Warren Jeffs, and he isn't that loving type at all. So I immediately started seeing red flags. And then he started to question me a lot about my childhood, which is one of his behaviors, to try to find out if we are perfect, which nobody is. So when he found out about some of the childhood experiences, after I told him and after he may have already known because he questioned me so hard about certain things, then he started to implement his own justice system. Like, he had this whole secret justice system. It wasn't normal. It wasn't like the court system out here, but he claimed authority to, he was above the law, and he claimed authority to decide if you got to stay in the church or if you didn't. And depending on how bad your crimes are or your sins, then he had the right to say what your punishments were, how long they lasted, where you lived, what you got to eat. Like, everything was under his control. So I went through like years of like basically atoning for things. To It was almost like he was analyzing first to find out what I did, and then after that it was like a series of like seeing if it was true. Like, and then after that, then there's supposed to be rewards if you pass the test, and one of the rewards is to join the group and continue this process to help to join his secret elite group, where you would judge children and other people's families because you now understand so much and you've survived. You basically qualified. And I didn't want to join his group. It was too much for me, and I just said no, I'm not going to. And so that wasn't an option. That wasn't an option in his group, because that would leave them vulnerable. All the people that had done it to me, that would leave them like able to be ratted out. And so they told me there was 4 things going to happen if I deny. Like, they just keep giving me opportunities to join, so I eventually will either join their group so they don't have to keep watching their backs, or I would die in the process, or I would become so mentally, like, they're gaslighting me really bad. So I'd become mentally incapable to continue and basically deemed crazy forever. Or else I would somehow escape and become public, and they won't do things openly. That's an airplane. Sorry. Anyway, so I decided to try to escape. They weren't going to let me escape, but it took me about 5 years, 3 years solid harassment, and then I made it back to where my father lived. And I stayed there for 2 years because I determined when I made it to his house that I wanted to help the kids before I left. I knew so much about how to help them in the justice system in the cult that I figured if I left, I'd have to learn how to run the regular system, and it would take me way longer than just helping them before I left. So I knew if I didn't do something, like if I did it immediately, I would end up, I probably wouldn't live through it. So I decided to wait a little while so they wouldn't know for sure it was me who ratted them out. And what I did is I wrote about everybody and what they had done to me, to Warren Jeffs, and within a week, every abuser that had contributed to my case ended up in the older compound where my father lived. And I almost didn't escape. Like, I was locked up in a little house. They were questioning me to find out if it was me, and it looked like it was me, so there wasn't a long span of time to figure this out, but they didn't want to just act for sure, So they locked me in a room with the doorknob turned around, and in the hallway, the lock was in the hallway. They put 2 screws in the window, and it was the kind of window that lift up. I actually didn't stay there long. I waited till I heard the truck leave, and then I found some scissors and I unscrewed one of the screws, and this one wasn't screwed all the way in, so I pounded on it until it broke off because I couldn't get it unscrewed with the scissors. And then, because some of somebody was in the house. It was my it was the wife of the person was still home, and she heard me pounding on it. She actually came in and took everything I was using, and I just kept pounding on it. But what she didn't realize is that I already had one screw undone, and they had told me to lay down and read. So when I got the last screw undone and I stopped pounding, I heard her gasp, and I thought if I open any drawers, she's going to know I'm taking things to leave. So I just snuck out the window. I didn't take anything with me, not even my ID or anything. And she thought I laid down. So I was gone for like 2 hours before they realized that I had actually left. She thought I had another screw to undo, and I didn't. I had already got that one undone. So I took back roads because I had already tried main roads. I was 26. They were trying to get things worked out to where I would be, because they had cult doctors and things drugging me. They had a lot of records that they had created to maybe commit me and take away my rights. But it didn't happen before I escaped. I ran into a family that I thought would help me. I knew where they lived, and it was an older compound. So I knew how to, if I made it there through the back roads, which I did, then I knew I'd probably be okay. I ran through a yard of a lady who was sitting in her yard meditating right before I got to the house, and she said, "Can I help you?" And she was dressed different than people in our cult. So I knew she wasn't from the FLDS. I mean, at least she wasn't still in the FLDS, because she wouldn't be dressed like that. And I said, "Yeah, I'm trying to get to that house next door." So she drove me to the house next door, and she's like, "Should I go in or should I just sit out here?" I'm like, "You might as well go in." So she went in, and she's the one that knew who to call. The family I ran to didn't know any of the numbers of the organizations helping people because they had too recently left themselves. They wanted me to just stay with them. They're like, "We'll be okay." I'm like, "I won't be okay. Like, I've been brought back so many times." So by the end of the day, they drove me out of the town. I met with my now adopted mom, Kristen Decker, and she was in an organization helping people. Took me to her home that night. I had never met her. She was from a different group than the FLDS. She's from the AUB group. And that started my journey on the outside, which is what I do now. It took me a while. I went to Tennessee because they were searching the roads. They put me on the missing list. I had the Department of Justice fly in and take me off the missing list because they verified that I was not missing. I went into Tennessee and changed my name, got legally adopted, changed my social. And then when they changed my social, I couldn't pay my rent because they didn't change over my SSI income immediately. It would be a month or so, and you can't do that with rent. So I talked to my attorney who changed my name, and he's like, "I just had a pilot who was from the FLDS, and he has some free tickets, and he gave them to me for people in crisis." And so I ended up flying back to Salt Lake at least. And I stayed there for a year. I started to date, and then I ended up hearing about Warren Jeff's house. And there's a whole bunch of history about how my name came out in the public and stuff. People around me found out about my name, and it came out in my town. People knew my secret name, so I wasn't secret anymore. Like that didn't work very well. So I ended up hearing about Warren Jeff's house and knew the history of this town. I knew the land in Colorado City and Hillsdale, Utah better than I, even to this day, can understand the land on the outside. I knew so much about the UEP Trust and how it was made. Warren Jeffs actually stood up and said, "If you want to stay a member of the FLDS Church, you need to donate all your titles to your houses to this charitable trust called the UEP." And that included, like, if you want to keep your wives and kids, because they're all arranged marriages, they're all like gifts to each other. And so, like, if you don't donate your title, then you can lose your wife or your husband and all your kids. So a lot of people did. And this older compound, the newer ones are all FLDS people. The older compounds, like Colorado City and Hillsdale, there was a mixture of people. and the ones that didn't donate their titles were kicked out of the church. And anyway, so the UEP had all the titles, and so Warren just started calling up people and telling them, your family's smaller, you need to move into this house, and your family's bigger. The houses they built didn't factor in anymore because he owned all the titles. That's how he got to where he would tell people where to live. And so when Warren just ran from the law, then the state took over the state of Utah and Arizona took over the UEP trust and started giving back the titles to people. So Warren Jeff's house. So when that happened, Warren Jeffs actually told everybody not to cooperate because they felt like their land was being stolen from them. So they told them not to cooperate with the state and the people that had taken over the titles. And so they weren't paying their back taxes in this area. And what it did is make so that they were all being evicted out of houses because you have to pay your taxes at least. And so no houses had been saved for FLDS up until about the time that I had a friend come in with me. We went and applied for Warren Jeff's house. And we were granted a house through a process. Like, a friend was in the background, another friend, they were supporting me in the cause, and they stood up and donated 4 houses to the cause to ensure that I got the opportunity to go and do something with Warren Jeff's house. My dream was, and what I proposed to them, is that it would become like a shelter type place for people transitioning from the outside world, isolated situations. I mean, from the cult into the outside world. And they did give me an opportunity in the end. I got the keys on Thanksgiving Day, so I applied in February. And on Thanksgiving Day, they gave me the keys of the same year. And I had till March 15th to find a buyer because it was like $50,000 just for the back taxes. They did give me a significant, they dropped the price, but it still was a lot. It's like we had some people go in there and appraise it that it was like worth $6 million or something. It was 3 houses on the same lot. One was 29 square feet, just one house, and there was 3 on the lot, and the other ones were smaller. But so we had at least $600,000 we had to come up with, and I can't just go get a loan for $600,000. So we had to find a buyer, and I did media because it was a high-profile house. Everybody wanted to hear about it, and I also did free tours of the house. And that's how we found the buyers. And the Phoenix Dream Center came in about 3 days before we were going to be evicted and bought the entire compound with the lease to own. And now they have the title. It's been about almost 3 years since we signed over the property to the Dream Center. And they have the title and everything now. I've been working there as an advisory board member and doing all kinds of activism, and fundraising is part of it. Fundraising and then the activism part, it links up pretty well. But so that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to ask some questions again. I told her before, but I want to be respectful. So if I ask a question doesn't get answered, that's okay. But let's start kind of back at because there's so much stuff out there. I mean, I try to do research at this, but it's just too much stuff out there to know. Right. But as far as how did Warren Jeffs become, was he considered a prophet? What was his role in the FLDS church? Was he considered a prophet, or was he just by default the leader? Did he just gain more persuasion than any other leader, and so he became the leader? How did he end up in the position of leadership that he was in?
So basically, he capitalized on history. He was put in as a school teacher in Salt Lake, in Sandy, Utah, Alta Academy when he was 17. So he experimented on children a lot. He studied Hitler and things. But what he taught us as children was he taught a lot of church history, which he never taught world history, but he taught church history in the school. It's a homeschool.
And so it's a homeschool. The Alta Academy is a homeschool, and is it specifically homeschool for
FLDS
families?
It was. Now it's not there.
Okay.
So
But
anyway, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he taught, the story that he used was when Wilford Woodruff signed the manifesto and gave up polygamy.
Uh-huh.
FLDS are a branch off of the LDS Church because they believe in polygamy. So he said that the voice of the people got Wilford Woodruff to be the prophet. The people had a say in that. That's what he told us. I don't know if it's true.
Okay.
And he also told us that and then he told us that the true leader will never have the people will not have a say in it. He said the true leader God chooses, and if you want to follow him, then that's, benefit to you. But the people don't get to vote for it. And that's how that happened, is they said Wilford Woodruff was voted in by the people, so the true prophet was chosen by God, and it was a different man. And his name was John W. Woolley or something. That was the leader of the FLDS that carried on polygamy. That's what he told us. And so when he became the leader, his father was the leader before him. Basically, when his father died, then he got up in church and just said, if you're coming, come. If you're not, then you're out of here.
So then did he, at that point, excommunicate, I guess you could say, anybody who didn't want to follow him? They were no longer at the LDS Church. And then, but they still, I'm assuming, held a lot of the same religious beliefs still, even though they didn't really trust or want to follow him, they still held a lot of the same beliefs. So where did all those families end up?
They go to different branches. There's so many different branches for similar reasons. Like, they're all have their own stories behind them, but that's how the AUB, it's a branch too. That's where my mom came from, but it wasn't that specific one. I think when that happened, a lot of them went to Canada, where Winston Blackmore was. There's so many, and some go join the LDS Church. Some just do their own thing. There's so many branches. There's Kingston. There's tons of branches off of the LDS Church mostly.
Yeah, so
but that does happen. Centennial is a next door town to here that has a branch off of FLDS. So there's some that even come off of some of these fundamentalist groups.
So he was believed to be at least by his constituents, he was believed to be the prophet, or at least the leader of the church.
That God chose him. Yeah, he claimed that God chose him.
Okay, so that was a foundational belief. And then, so when you say you had traumatic experiences as a child but didn't know they were traumatic until later, what was it that helped you see that they were actually more traumatic than they were?
Well, the main thing is that Warren Jeffs made a big deal out of him. When he found out, because what happened is I was molested as a child by my brother, and my brother was 12. I was 8 about, and I wasn't the only one there. I have a sister older than me and a sister younger than me, so it was like a group thing. And I didn't realize it was traumatic because my brother was 12 and he didn't take off his clothes or anything, so I didn't realize it was that serious. But when I went into Warren Jeff's family and he heard about it, I don't know where he heard about it. I did talk about some things, but I think he already knew because there was so many people involved. And basically, he judges people by the time, because there's this doctrine in the Doctrine and Covenants that he takes everything to the extreme, as hard as they can be. And the doctrine says something about if you don't understand the scriptures by the time you're 8 years old, the sin goes on the head of the parent. Anyway, and that Jesus stops atoning for you when you're 8 years old. So anyway, he judges people basically at 8 years old as an adult. They don't have juvenile. They don't he takes things so extreme. I've had many people ask me, is he leading the church more exactly? I'm like, it's kind of more extreme. I don't think you would say it would be more exactly because it's just so far-fetched. As far as you can go left, it's as far unbalanced as you can get, it's on that side. I don't think that's more exact.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's just things like that maybe should have been, I mean, they were traumatic experiences, but then they got amplified, and maybe they weren't traumatic experiences, but there are things that it would have been better if they didn't happen in your life, and then they became traumatic because of how much emphasis he put on them when he heard about them.
Yeah, he wanted to punish people. Like the same brother, when I was put locked up, it was my brother who locked me up. He was threatened too, I believe. And he had little kids at that time, and he had a family, and so it was a really big deal by the time Warren Jeffs, took over and decided that he was not worthy or whatever, or we weren't worthy because of that traumatic experience that happened. So this is years and years later, and he's being judged as an adult, like for something that happened when he was 12.
Right.
So he lost his family. He doesn't, he took away his kids and his wife and everything. And it could have been a lot worse if I hadn't escaped, but I did escape. And anyway, so I think that he still got judged pretty harshly for something that happened at 12. Who would want to lose their foundation, and their life, basically, their wife and their kids for something they did when they were 12. Out here, like, that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Most likely. A juvenile would have some consequences as a juvenile, but they wouldn't really, like, if they overcome it, by the time they're an adult, they've done that,
Sure.
And he was judged really harshly for something that happened for him.
Yeah.
I believe it was pretty harsh.
Yeah, and I think the reason I wanted to ask that way is there's so many different people who are listening to this from all over the world. Okay, so you have to think, like, this isn't just a Utah audience that's listening to this. This is a world audience listening to this, and everybody has stuff in their childhood that either they wish didn't happen, or that maybe wasn't traumatic when it happened. You just kind of moved on, but then became more traumatic later. And we have to learn to get past that and say, okay, this is, as you say, we don't need to punish ourselves for what happened when we were kids. Me personally, I've done some really stupid things when I was younger, and now I look back and I think, man, that person wasn't even Samuel, right? The person who did all of that was somebody who was 15 years ago. Whoever that guy was, I don't even I don't identify as that guy anymore. I've changed so much over the last 15 years, and so that's something that I want to help people understand, that we can change, and it's important for us to change and progress, and we don't need to be held captive by, either internally or externally, the things that happened so long ago in our lives.
But also there's a process where everybody heals differently. And I've had, like, people talk to me about, like, your brother may never heal from that. Like, his trauma was so deep and so intense that I can't require him to heal,
Sure.
And I've just come to grips with that. I'm like, yeah, he might not. He's out of the church now. But, I'm like, yeah, that seems fair, to me. Why, maybe he'll heal with other people, but not, like, our relationship may never heal. You know what I mean? And I can never require that of him.
Yeah. So,
like, I can watch from a distance and hear from other people if he's being good, or, like, I can hear signs. I recognize signs. And it's not just him. It's like other people that have abused me that were kicked out of the church after I tattled on them, like way later. I did talk to Warren Jeffs and turn in some of the people that had been in the judge group, because what I wanted to do was get them out of their position so the kids would have a breath of air. Because if they lost, because they had hurt me really bad, but, I'd been tortured for 3 years, basically, psychologically. But if they were all threatening each other and stuff. So, like, if I get them all out of their positions, then they have to retrain adults to be in those positions. And during that time frame, the kids might not be under so much pressure. So that was my goal with that. But I didn't turn my brother in at that time at all. Like, I didn't even talk about my brother, because I had already learned my lesson about that, like when I first went into the family, like, I had done enough, as part of that topic went.
So
yeah.
After you, we'll say you escaped to get on the outside, what was, like, well, I want to ask one more question, two more questions here before we get on to the outside. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, in the that religion, I guess, at this point, because it sounds like it was all arranged and kind of gifts and stuff. But what was the purpose of marriage to have 65 or however many wives Warren Jeff ultimately had? What was the purpose from his perspective of having all of these people be his wives?
Well, it's a doctrine. It's polygamy. It's an extreme version of same thing. Like he took the doctrine of Joseph Smith and made it like really extreme. Anything he could hear about polygamy, of course, to Warren Jeffs, he's taking every little piece. So he's applying it as if it's real. Even if it was like an apostate who said something, he's going to like listen to everything and decide that it's real. Like he always goes to the extreme. So he believes that you need at least three wives to make it into the highest degree of glory in the celestial kingdom. But when he has so many, he would have talk about higher laws. Like basically he talked about Jesus is our elder brother and we're all trying to become like Jesus and we're going to have worlds. And in order to populate worlds, you need more wives to have more kids. And you're ultimately going to populate worlds by doing that. And he talked about quorums of wives and different things. So he thought that 7 was a good number. I don't know why. And he thought you need 7 in a quorum, and just things like that.
Okay.
So it's basically to populate worlds.
The reason I ask, and I grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but from my childhood, right, polygamy had been gone for a long time. So I've never understood past what we're taught, and
I don't know everything you're taught, but yeah.
And we basically were taught there was a purpose for it, but it's no longer needed, basically. So that's why I'm wondering what is in the religion, what's the doctrinal teaching of this is why they're doing this, and this is the benefit to them doing this, because then it kind of leads to the next thing. But how many times did you try to escape this? Were you trying to escape just the family, or were you actually trying to get out of completely the FLDS culture, everything? What exactly were you trying to escape?
I was trying to escape just the FLDS. I didn't want to be a part of that religion. I couldn't even really function at this time frame. I was getting worse and worse psychologically because of the gaslighting was so severe that I couldn't really even function in that environment. I needed to get out. So I've been out for now 8 years, and I was actually in Warren Jeff's family for 8 years. So the difference now is really dramatic and obvious.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you got out, so if you, from your perspective, again, I don't know much about this, but you've chosen a completely different lifestyle, different religion, everything, or are you where are you at now? Because the reason I'm asking this from a perspective of there's a lot of people who may have not been in polygamy, but there's just as weird of things. And when I say weird, that's not a derogatory term. It's just there's the general, what we would consider normal, and that's what everybody knows about. And then there's all the how individual families operate inside their own homes that nobody knows about. Okay. So we all have these little ticks in our family that when family A, this child is raised in family A, and they have certain expectations about how life is going to be, the order of a family, who's in charge, who does what, who cleans the toilets, who folds clothes, right? They have this idea, and then when they grow up and they go to get married and they marry some other person, that person has their own family order, and it's this marrying of two orders that can create a lot of tension in relationships. And so that's why I'm asking, I want to get into the principles that are applicable everywhere, not necessarily just in your situation, but what exactly do you feel is different now? Where are you at now, either from a religious or relationship or family status that's different from what you were raised with?
So basically, I had to learn that. When I left, I learned it. So I basically had to figure out if people were meant what they said, because in the gaslighting system they don't always mean exactly what they're saying. They mean the double meaning sometimes. So I was I studied people I didn't have constant clarity for about 6 months till after I left. But what I found is that people didn't purposely do things to hurt me out here. Like they usually are generally genuine. Like they really mean what they're saying, and they don't even think anything of it. They don't plot and plan things just to throw you off. So like if something does happen, it's usually a mistake, and they'll say sorry and all these things. So most commonly out here, people were just like basic people, normal, trying to survive. And in there, they were actually plotting and planning and trying to create scenarios to actually gaslight me. And it would come out like periodically, and I would see this symbol and I would see this symbol. It was like code. And so I was getting worse. So by the time 8 years came, and I was literally running away and climbing out of like I was getting worse. They were trying to force me to be committed. But now it's been 8 years of being out here. I have not even been in a hospital for like 3 years. Like I still have to take like something because they were drugging me, and then they would stop drugging me, and stuff like that. They would do like Warren Jess would tell them she doesn't need it today. She needs it today. That's not what they do out here. Doctors, you either have medicine or you don't. You don't like decide that God told you today you don't need it. That actually makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they were purposely making me go crazy because I wouldn't join their secret group. So, yeah.
And I think that that's a valuable lesson, because there's lots of secret groups or just groups out there. And if you are not going to be part of it, then there's a lot of people who will make your life miserable if you don't want to be part of it. We're seeing that right now in our nation with certain racial groups. And it's like, if you're not willing to take this stance about belief, then you're exiled. And it doesn't matter where you were, sports, media, like it doesn't matter what your position is. If you don't fall in line to a certain belief or at least talking point, then you're exiled. So like this type of things, these happen all over in our lives. And the more that we can understand, and it's unfortunate that there's these extreme examples, right? But the more we can understand the extreme examples where it's blatant disregard for the crazy, like for what's going on, then we can, when we understand the pressures and the reasons behind this, and we can start applying it more to our lives and say, okay, this is a situation that although it's not as extreme or it doesn't appear as extreme, it's the same principle at work, and I don't want that principle in my life.
It's like like mental illness is hereditary a lot of times, and people are born with that and have to deal with it. I was describing this to somebody, like I says, I know a lot about that because of being diagnosed and things, in the cult, and then eventually figuring out that I had been affected. I know that sometimes it's hereditary, sometimes it's brought on by trauma, sometimes it's hereditary. But the ones that have to deal with it their entire lives, when they have a trigger, they're taught by the therapist, most likely, that a trigger you have to deal with. Like, it's not always obvious. So the person who's over here, it doesn't even know they triggered you half the time. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to develop your own coping skills to deal with your own triggers. And it's unfortunate because they didn't purposely do that. Maybe their parents, shouldn't have. I'm just saying, they didn't have a choice in that. They were born with that. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of the same thing of when racism and stuff, like it definitely is a trauma. I mean, I was born in a cult. I understand that it was a childhood, intergenerational, but just because we can see it doesn't really take away the same, like you could apply some of those same things. Yeah. Why don't we teach what we need to do also? I'm not saying the only thing, but also how we can battle our own triggers, because most people have to do that. Yeah. They have to learn how to cope themselves also. And you do need a support system, and you need all that stuff, and they should have that too. But forcing somebody else to study your triggers is almost like it's not all productive.
Yeah, it's narcissistic, I think, at best, if you think that you can say, oh, no, I don't need to change all of my triggers or whatever. I need you to pad my environment so that I don't get triggered. There's just no way around that. I think of like I was literally just driving down the street the other day, and I used to clean trucks for a living. Like I worked in a big truck wash, and we'd clean them. There'd be 6 guys there, and we'd clean them. And then once we cleaned the truck, the lead would go around with a flashlight and make sure that everybody did their job correctly and cleaned it all. And I was thinking, man, when a truck rolled in, it used to be I could know exactly like what type of paint, what type of wheel shine, everything, and I could just see it. And because I could see it, then I knew how to wash the truck. I knew what solutions to use and which not to use, right? Because I just did it all the time. Whereas now, if I went, I'd probably screw up trucks all the time. I'd probably ruin them because I don't have the hyper awareness to it. Well, that same thing happens when you remove all other sensories or all other potential things that you've padded your environment from so much stuff. Then even the things that nobody else would be triggered by become triggering because they're the only things that could trigger you because you've padded your environment from so many other things. So there's value in not removing all of those things. Another example from my life, as I've gotten older, I've removed from my life dirty hands, like playing in dirt. I don't play in dirt. I don't like, there's so much stuff that I've removed from my life. Getting wet. Even if we go to the swimming pool, I don't like getting wet. I don't like I get in the shower and that's about the extent of me getting wet. I don't like baths. I don't love swimming. I used to love all those things, but I've padded my environment so much that I get to stay the same temperature. I get to wear my nice clothes whenever I want. And like, I don't even have dirty clothes anymore. I don't have clothes to go camping in because I got rid of them all. I created my environment just how I wanted it. And there's benefit that I live in this environment, but the downside is I'm no longer being challenged and tested to like, how do I react when my clothes get dirty now? I used to like rub paint on my clothes and not care. Now, if my clothes get a little pen mark on it, I'm like, got to throw it away. I don't want to wear that shirt anymore. And it's so silly. Yeah. It's so silly, but it's like, I actually, because I started seeing this habit 2 or 3 weeks ago, I actually took my son camping and just played in the dirt and got messy and didn't shower for 2 or 3 days just to like allow myself to be in an environment that makes me uncomfortable. So it's important to have those environments and not pad yourself, I think, so much from environments that challenge you that you lose your ability to cope during challenging environments.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real thing. I actually know, like, this is an extreme example, but it kind of portrays a lot. Like, so like when Warren Jeff's wives, when they got into his family, they basically lived off of the system. They lived off of so he had 79 wives in the end, and they all lived off donations. And I had a sister older than me that was 5 years older, and there was so many of them that forgot how hard it is to work and earn things because they had been so long since they had to. Like, they all had a schedule, they all got up and did their basic things, but they didn't hesitate to go and ask for white peelings in their teeth or LASIK or, like things like that cost so much money and people work years for them, but they're living off donations and they never felt that pain. So they just forgot about it, that they were actually asking people to not eat. There were people starving to pay those donations, and they didn't see it, and they would just go ask for LASIK. Like, it was really sad, and I didn't like that about it. That was one of the reasons why I just left that whole thing. But, I had to in the end, but it was part of it is because I wanted to know. I think you have to want to put in the effort to learn the things that are like you're saying, you need challenges to improve, and you have to want to overcome things. Like, you have to want to be a part of something normal,
Yeah, something that there's more in common with. So I'm curious, like, out of all of these experiences, I know from like childhood to now, what do you feel like your secret weapon is, like a habit, mindset, or behavior that you had to develop or you had innate inside of you that helped you become who you are today? Because now you're this incredible woman, writing books, like going around, going to share your story and impact millions of people's lives, help millions of people overcome traumatic stress of all types, not just your specific type, but even just in your own community, helping people who want to transition out into the greater world. Like, what do you feel like is one habit, mindset, or behavior that really contributes most to your ability to do that?
I usually tell people, this is a quote I live, like I literally live this: face your fears, but don't always do it in, like, make sure it's in a safe environment. Like, I went to Salt Lake when I first came back from Tennessee. That's an example, because I wanted to face my fears, and I wanted to do it in a safe place. Like, I don't just dive into your abuser's home and think that you're going to be, like, I'm facing my fears. Like, don't do that. But in a safe environment, face your fears. Take those little steps that will get you where you want to be. Because now I have a house in this community, in this older compound that I escaped from. Like, and I don't have, like, I learned that to face my fears actually helped with my PTSD that I had. Like, I had, when I lived in Tennessee, I would have panic attacks because of the worry if somebody was following me or somebody was doing this or that, the other. Well, I just decided I want to know. I'm just going to go right and face it in the best way I can, take those steps, go visit that place, check it all out. I knew that they told me that if I became public, they wouldn't bother me. So, that's going to be something that will contribute to my success, So, so those worries faded over time. It's because I created the situation that would help them fade. So I didn't live my life out with panic attacks, that may be unnecessary.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that I think is the biggest thing, and that's a principle literally anywhere, in business, in sales, in relationships. Rather than build up in your mind how terrible this thing may or may not be, parenting is tough sometimes, and it's so easy to think, oh, this didn't happen, which means this, and this whole long train of story that you're going to tell yourself about what is or isn't going to happen. Instead of saying all of those things to yourself, you can just say, hey, look, let's deal with what it is. Let's go confront the problem. I know that it makes, like, to the point where my wife, sometimes it makes her uncomfortable, because, like, if I even recognize, if I come home and I say, hey, how was your day? And I recognize her tone is a little off when she says, yeah, it's okay. If her tone is off, if her speed of how quick she's talking is off, if her body language is off, then I'm like, nothing else is important. Kids could be screaming, hey, what's going on? How can I help? Like, just let me be here for you. And sometimes she doesn't want that, right? Sometimes I confront stuff too quickly, too directly for people. And it has its downsides for me sometimes, but I would say I'd rather be over confrontational about the things that I need to deal with than to, like, put it on the back burner and delay the confrontation and build up a story about how bad the confrontation is going to be. I love that. That is, I don't think anybody's ever said that on my podcast before. But
really?
I needed to hear that today, so thank you. And I'm sure many other people need to hear that as well. Just go face your fears gradually, slowly, and have the boundaries in place, and build
safe environment. Yeah.
Safe environment. Create a safe environment so you can face your fears. I love that.
Yeah.
So what have you done? Now you're on this journey. You're gonna share your story with the world over and over and over and over again. How did you get the financial backing to live your legacy and really begin the journey? Because I know that's sometimes hard, especially, like, escaping. You don't even have ID. You don't have anything. Where do you get the financial backing to do what you need to do and what you've become today?
Well, at first I lived off SSI. Like, I lived in shelters, and then I got SSI, and then I did the Dream Center. I had SSI clear until I did the Dream Center, and the Dream Center actually hired me and paid me pretty well, so that I could figure out, like, other insurance and all of that stuff. And that was in the contract that they would do that because they wanted me that bad. And so I've been with them for almost 3 years. October will be 3 years. advisory board member, and I just pace myself. And I find that, like, with a big story, sometimes you do have advantages. Where, like, I started doing my books. That was one of the requests they had. They wanted me to be in fundraising. So they had a set level that I had. I knew the set amount every month. So I had to just take it out of my check, and make it work. But I knew that it would get better over time.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did, like, you can become a better speaker and you can get paid for speaking, eventually, stuff like that. But what I did at first was I went into the book coaching session and met a girl who took over the whole project. And of course it's going slow because she's paying for everything, and also, and then I found another person who has backing already that took on another project that's with my story. And then this year, the documentary lady, she's creating that backing. So with a big story, they do take it, and they do. A lot of people will take your. I don't sign away my rights to it, but they're willing to dive in and do something amazing with it, because a lot of it is your angle. Like with my angle, I want to share, like what you're saying, like how to start completely over in a traumatized state and succeed, which is not an easy thing to do. And so it's like the message people are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, like in this day and age, even people that haven't been through it, they want to know that it's possible. So you kind of have to scope around and find your options. I talk a lot, like I'm a social person, and I don't do a lot of reading, even though I want to get into that. I know why. I figured out I got LASIK last year, and they told me that my eyes are a little bit spread apart, and whenever I focus, I have to actually focus my eyes, which takes more energy. Most people don't have to do that.
Huh.
It just, like, they automatically focus, but I have to actually move my eyes to focus. So I'm trying to overcome that, by just reading more. Yeah. But now that I know what it is, it just takes more energy. So I don't read a lot, but what I do is I talk a lot. Like, I pick up on clues, like, all the time. Where do I look? What do I do? How do I do this? Like, I go visit people. I try to delve into relationships a lot. I mean, like, with any kind, every level of taking care of people, like taking the time to study what their likes are, listen, and it takes a lot of work to do that too, but it just comes kind of natural to me. I mean, I love to do that kind of stuff. So, and most of my learning came from talking.
That's awesome.
Just from talking to people.
Talking to different people. That's so cool. So if we wanted to engage in your story, or we know somebody who could benefit from your story, or we just want to have a conversation with you, or we want to donate, fund for you're raising funds for the Dream House. What's the best place to get in contact with you? I mean, I know there's lots of things about you on Google, but where do we actually find you, and where would we go to get in contact with you specifically?
It's like how you found me, through Facebook, which was my Facebook. I do update, like, quite a bit, and I'm trying to broaden the more things. But right now you find me on Briell Blanchart, which is my married name now. I've been married 3 years. So yeah, I just get on there a lot, and I post my story. Like, if you follow my timeline, you will start to pick up on what I'm doing now, and on the things I can talk about, which a lot of things are secret until they happen. But
I know it's the nature of being in those contracts, which is fine. I think it's good, and it's good to it's often good to just do stuff and talk about it later, anyways. So,
do you want to hear this poem or not? Like,
yeah, I love
I write poetry. Okay, so this talks about some of the challenges that big challenges that I have had to. And the interesting thing about this poem is that they can either be a save or they can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of describes that. You might think you got it all, but deep down there's probably something if you just let go of that belief, you might be happy. They tell you it will hurt, and you can never go back. But it's hard not to think. It just doesn't add up. It might be an honest fear, oppression surrounding you, or perhaps just the fact you have to hide who you are. You might be holding on to that measly SSI check, afraid to branch out. But what if I stumble again? It could be a subconscious bully whispering to yourself, you can't give another chance. It's just too much. You maybe are trapped physically and have no way but to dream, or perhaps there's a hope that something may someday change. The bill, the time, something is unclear. Maybe you prioritize and find your back right here. Are you sure you're free? And if so, to what degree? Because I'm willing to bet there's more yet. So all of these things are things that I have personally like dealt with. Like SSI, like that is the most you can get is like $750 or something in Utah. And in some ways that's nice, but other ways it keeps you locked in a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So most of these things there's two sides to it. You can have the positive of what you can get, but if you had this, if you unlock the door, if you fought those fears, if you figure out how to climb over those, imagine, they seem like enormous things usually when you're going through them.
Yeah.
But if you just keep taking it one day at a time and actually looking for the clues that will build a different structure for yourself, it's not impossible.
That's so incredible. I love that poem. I'm going to have to go re-listen to it lots of times. It's so cool. Awesome. Well, so here's the last question. I'm excited to hear your answer to this. This is my favorite question to ask people. It's the thing that guides me every day. I think about this multiple times a day. I can't say it's always in my mind, but I would say 90% of what I do on a daily basis is guided by my answer to this question. So I'm excited to hear your answer to this question. Okay, so the question is basically, what legacy are you building? So to put in context, imagine that you have died and you come back and you're able to see your great grandchildren sitting around a table. So this is 6 generations from now, sitting down around a table, talking about what Briell's life was. What did she bring to the world? What was her legacy? What did she accomplish? What do you want your legacy to be 6 generations from now?
I want it to be that I started over in a traumatized situation and succeeded. Like I want to succeed in, like I can't change the past, obviously. So I have to include what would make me need to start over in a traumatized situation. But also it's like educate and empower. And I want to succeed. Like I mean, it's an ongoing process, but I want to succeed in multiple layers. Like I want to keep going. It motivates me every day. The feeling of achievement, that feeling is what motivates me. Like I want that feeling so much. Like I just, and also contrast because I know how bad it can get. I know the feeling of being here, and to be where I am even right now isn't as far as I want to be, but it's definitely significantly better. Sure. Having a house, people tell me I knocked off 15 years just getting our house.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we have it in 8 years from the time that I escaped. We have our own house, it's like huge. It's a fix up, but we can live in it. It's nice. That's
so cool. I love that. And you're going to get your dream. And I love that your dream and your legacy is, yes, it's some of those things, but it's the legacy of constant achievement, constant growth, constant developing of yourself and never stopping. And if that's all you get remembered by is, you overcame you came from a traumatic state and you never stopped progressing. For me, I think that's the foundation of all religious beliefs or the theological philosophy is to become proficient in creation and then to never stop creating, whatever that looks like, however that looks like. And I just am so grateful for you coming on and being willing to share your story. We're going to stay connected for sure. We're going to see if we can help you in multiple other areas.
Right.
It's just so big. I love it. I love your dream. I love your legacy, and I'm here to support you in any way possible. And definitely, if you guys are listening to this and you think, hey, thank you for sharing this message, go find her on Facebook, go find her on Instagram, and message her and say, hey, thank you for sharing your story. There are things that I needed to hear in that.
Yeah, and you will definitely cut my learning curve quite a bit because you have studied so many, like even doing YouTube is hard for me until I learn it.
Everything starts out hard in my experience, and then you do it enough times, and just like your secret weapon of confronting the fear of whatever, your trauma, it's the same thing. You got to confront, hey, I got to figure out Facebook. If I'm going to figure out Facebook, I just got to get on there and do it enough times to figure it out. If I want to figure out YouTube, you got to get on and do it enough times to figure it out. Same thing with anything.
Yeah, but you will cut my learning curve if I pay you and, and like talk to you more, because you have done that. Mm-hmm. You see? So talking to people, yeah, it does create situations where you can cut your learning curve if you take advantage of them.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the thing. Are you going to take advantage of it, or are you just going to let this go by? And I know that you, for one, you're an action taker, and I love that. So love it. Thank you so much. We'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.